Hey everybody, this is Mike with the One Stop Co-op Shop, and today I'm reviewing Dawn of Madness, an epic narrative horror game for 1 to 4 players. And disclaimer that I got a review copy for this one. Different characters called Wanderers move around among 16 locations, avoiding and sometimes fighting an abomination who's chasing them, as well as other terrors. Actions in the game are handled with a track for you and the enemies, where whoever is at the highest spot will get to take an action, and it'll cost 1 or more spaces of movement. And for combat, defense, and counters, you'll be resolving tests with dice, and reading through many long, detailed stories, trying to reach one of 4 endings. So let's get to 5 key things about Dawn of Madness. So first, for my number 5, I'm looking at the characters in the game and how they upgrade and change, and this is a bit of a mix for my taste. So each character starts with an item, although others could potentially get it. They start with a unique skill, and they can upgrade into other skills. Now, they don't have that many to begin with, but as you play through a given Wanderer's scenario, because each of the 4 characters has their own story to play through, you can unlock more cards that can boost them, or weaken them, or give them more options for leveling. And this is both fun and frustrating because, as I'll mention later, the game takes a long time, so to actually play through each character's scenario once to unlock stuff for each of them would take quite a while. You also have these coda cards that you can earn as you complete encounters and reveal parts of the story, and they'll change your core stats, and usually they'll add to one while decreasing another, so you don't really get stronger, it just kind of changes your focus. Feels a bit like Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. You might love or hate this. Again, you're not really getting better, you're just changing in ways that just sometimes feel a little bit random, but can also be cool. My number 4 point is focused on the enemies in the game who are chasing you and the core action system that interacts with them, and this is generally a pro for my taste. This action system's been done before, but I really like how tactically it lets you manage the enemies, because you can see at all times what their preferences are, what actions they might take. And you can often be really clever in when you let them take a turn and where your characters are when they do, because then they might do something useless or actually move to be in range of your attacks. And the basic terrors are quite varied in what they do and how they mess with you. The 8 abominations, the sort of bosses in the game, each have their own unique deck and way of activating. Although I will note that while I enjoy the enemies and the action system, a lot of the game's focus is on story, and sometimes fighting the enemies and dealing with them, especially when there's a lot of them on the board, can feel like a chore because the tactics are sort of deeper than a heavy narrative game might demand. Next, my number 3 is the core dice resolution system, and for my taste, it's a bit of a mix. So for most tests, you'll roll just one color based on your character's stats, and you'll be looking for very specific faces. So they have a bunch of these unique faces, then they also have a wild side that's always good. And this can feel pretty random. For a lot of tests, you'll have only a 1/3 chance of hitting on each die, or sometimes half a chance. But in the game's favor, they have a lot of ways to mitigate. You can use domain cubes that you've earned to re-roll dice, or get automatic successes, or to help other players by letting them roll more. Players can also discard the items they've earned for automatic successes. So even though you are somewhat beholden to the randomness of the dice, you can really make your own fate a lot of the time if you're willing to spend resources for it. Although on the negative side, this whole domain system and all the different faces and keeping track of all the different abilities, especially when you're learning the game, can be a bit much. It feels pretty complicated for a straightforward resolution system. Now for my number 2, this is a big one, and I think for a lot of people this will be their number 1 point, the thing that maybe keeps them away from the game. It's a full-on con for my taste, and that's how long the game is, how sprawling it is. So this is a big game. Even playing with only 2 characters, it takes up basically my entire big table. And they don't give you any way in the game to organize all the many pieces, so if you don't have kind of your own system like I did here, you're going to have some challenges. But I'm bearing the lead here because here's the main thing. Playing a full scenario of this, and the game expects you to get different endings with each of the 4 different characters, so they want you to play this game 8 times, 12 times, 16 times. Each play, even once you learn the game, is at least 5 or 6 hours, and I've had ones that went up to 8 hours or more. It's definitely been a challenge to get it to my table enough to do this review. I've only played it 3 times, which is way lower than I usually like to play games I'm covering. But my number 1, for my taste, is the story in the game, and this is a big pro, even though, again, the game is so long, and it's what made me want to play it, and still want to play it. And that's the amazing story in the game. This is, I hesitate to say this, but I think it's true, this is the best narrative I have ever read. There are 4 different characters, but each of them has 4 different endings and kind of different threads you're exploring. And there's huge variety in how these scenarios play from character to character. Like the rules are different. The types of encounters are very different. Now, lots of caveats. First of all, you are reading all the dang time in this game. So if you're playing multiplayer and people don't want to hear this, they're going to get bored. It is so much text. Also, it is very dark, it is very gruesome, it is very upsetting, so you need to have the right audience with the right frame of mind. But also the story is very non-linear. You're getting these encounters you're spawning on the board, and you can do them whatever order you want, and you're going to be working towards different endings, earning different codas, and the game just has so much to explore. Again, in 3 plays across 3 different scenarios, I feel like I only know a fraction of the story for each character, but I'm really, really curious to find out all the rest. So overall, Dawn of Madness is a bit of an odd one. I'll recommend it to fans of story games because it is pretty amazing, especially if you like dark, horrific themes. But the tactical portion of the game might be a little bit much for those narrative fans, though if you play on the story difficulty, it shouldn't be too bad. And then I can also kind of recommend it to crunchy tactical game players as well, because that combat and stuff can get interesting when there are a lot of enemies, but I don't know if they'll be in for so much reading and 7+ hours of play. But if you want to see the game in action and decide for yourself, I have a couple rounds of gameplay that I posted last week. Thanks for watching, good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.